Well, I will defer to Judge McBride. Since I'm at the other end of the spectrum, why don't we hear from Judge McBride, and then I'll join the discussion.
Nice pass, Elio. That would be an example of effective calendar management right there. The materials I have outline our system. I'm sure you've all studied them in detail. It occurs to me the question of effective calendar management might not be just from my perspective, because effective calendar management from my perspective means that if there are 500 cases filed on day 1, by day 365 they are all disposed of and the courtroom is empty. That would probably fit your definition too, but somewhere we diverge. What you would like to see, I think, is certainty of dates. You would like to know that if I'm setting a trial date, that it means something. And that is where I think our system is breaking down, and it may be breaking down in some kind of a terminal way. I'm not sure it's clear. In San Francisco, we get 500 new cases a year. About 12–15% of those become what are called preference cases because the plaintiff is aged and dying or both. We have to get those out in 120 days. We also have a rule in California that from filing, the plaintiff has 5 years to get to trial or there's a mandatory dismissal. At this point, and I have only had the master calendar for 2 months, we are getting out only preference cases and only 5-year cases. I'm not sure that that's going to be the situation forever, but we're taking a hard look at what we need to do to get a little deeper into the inventory. The way it is supposed to work is that the plaintiff comes down and files a complaint and names usually many, many defendants, gets them all served, and then groups cases together by disease type, mesothelioma, lung cancer, other types of cancer, asbestosis, and then whether or not, and this is the easy part, the plaintiff is living or dead. We take those groups at the suggestion of the plaintiff, and every 2 months we have a hearing in which we have a few standards, like the plaintiff's deposition is complete, and then we set them for trial 7 to 8 months out. That's all great theoretically, right? We're all set. We have general order discovery. It's all defined for you, what you can do. Everybody knows everybody. There's hardly any strangers in the mix. But we're not getting the cases out to trial. The reason we don't get the cases out to trial is they don't settle until the day of trial or into trial. We cannot make them settle earlier. Of the, let me remind myself of this because I always stumble on it. Of the 20,000 jurors we used, 20,000, we have a population, nighttime population of 700,000. We used 20,000 jurors for civil trials last year, and 50% of them went to asbestos trials. 10,000 citizens have been exposed to asbestos. Are you alive out there? Okay, thanks. And so what we need to do, oh, and by the way, along those lines, we sent 120 asbestos trials out with a panel. In other words, the citizens came and sat down and what's your name? And only 8 of those went to verdict during a 12-month period. That's where our docket management's not working. Settlement's not happening at a time before we use up all those assets. And by the way, you use up all those assets.
Judge, what would you think is a tool, a judicial tool that could be used to try to better that timing, to get the case, to get the parties in a position to settle so you're not wasting judicial resources and community resources?
Well, I think the lawyers who've appeared in front of me, and I see a few of them out here, probably know my philosophy is rooted in the presentation's nuns who carried a big leather strap and a 15-decade rosary and used it. I think the only way to make it happen is to make the pain of litigation happen sooner than later, to make the risk of a bad thing happening happen sooner than later. Honestly, I don't know how you can do it in the asbestos world because of the lawyers I see out here. You could wake them up in the middle of the night, tell them the disease and the client, and they could deliver an opening statement, a closing argument, and name all the witnesses. There's just not any run-up to, well, there's not huge run-up to trial costs. I think if there's a recognition, and now I'm straying into the collaborative notions that are so foreign to this world, that there's a limited pool of resources. Let's call it insurance money, just for fun. And the more that is devoted to the evaluation and settlement of claims ahead of time, the more efficient we become. The more that is devoted to traditional kinds of litigation, the less there is to go around, the more bankruptcies that there are, the more disappearing defendants. It's a very difficult balance between traditional litigation due process and the recognition that this macro world of how much money is there to pay for the apparently endless supply of asbestos injuries. It's a difficult problem, but I think more collaboration.
Let me jump right in here at this point to discuss the Los Angeles system of docket management with regard to asbestos cases. We have the most sophisticated, high-tech, efficient operation. We don't have a master calendar. We don't have coordination. We don't have any consolidation. We don't relate the cases. In fact, very little docket management at all. The asbestos cases are divided among all the judges who sit in the downtown courthouse, about 50 individual calendar judges, and each judge controls his or her own calendar. And it takes about probably between 2 and 2.5 years to have the cases brought to trial. The big frustration, however, is that so many of the cases seem needlessly to get to the point of trial. Some of the cases actually start the trial, which I mean having witnesses testify. Other cases go through the motions of starting a trial, and that is the impaneling, I shouldn't say impaneling, to bring down the veneer of the jurors, going through the voir dire, then impaneling the actual trial jury, and then opening statement. That's the very last event. Most of the cases settle during that process. Sometimes you have 1 or 2 defendants standing, and the cases do go to trial with very few defendants that actually proceed to a trial. The frustrating aspect is the waste of the resources of the community, of our citizens, in going through this whole process when the parties know that the case is going to settle to most of the defendants. But nevertheless, there seems to be a lack of inertia or will to bring the settlement to a head at an earlier stage rather than waiting to the last moment. And unfortunately, rather than have trial counsel involved in the settlement discussions, trial counsel are usually excluded, and it is someone who is sitting on some other venue who is bringing cases together and parties together, trying to negotiate settlements without the input of the trial counsel. So I think the best area of focus in terms of efficient handling of the case is to try to develop procedures where we can bring the cases to a head as far as settlement is concerned at an earlier stage. There's no